When I met Bob Uecker 20 some years ago, I had been smoking crystal meth for days. I was high as a kite, right? Like nothing but smoking hours of the day, just total debauchery. And that's what my life was. This was like 20 some years ago. I was in Chicago at Wrigley Field, and I had press passes to the series with the Cubs and the Brewers. And of course, Bob Uecker is the legendary longtime Brewers play by play guy. And so I'm sitting in this tiny press box, and mind you, there's other guys, reporters doing their jobs, typing up notes, typing up stories, you know, and I'm sitting there in the back trying to hide from everyone because I had been up for days on a crystal meth binger, right? And at that time in my life, I was really in the throes of my addiction. I did. There was not a drug I ever said no to. I was Cocaine was my master. It was my go-to drug, but I also, there was other things. There was meth, there was IV drug use, there was uppers, downers, screamers, laughers, whatever you could throw at me. I was a crock pot. I took it all. And in this particular trip, I had been, doing meth, and by this time the paranoia had set in, right? Like, and you just think that everyone in the room is looking at you. And I was borderline hallucinating. Look, forget about meth. If you haven't slept in a few days, you're going to hallucinate. You combine that with a heavy drug like meth, forget about it, right? And so I was seeing things. I was seeing stars. I was seeing things that weren't real. I was hearing voices, and I had to get the fuck out of that press box. So because my heart was racing, I felt like I was having a panic attack or even a heart attack. So I walked out of the press box and I go into this little break room area or cafeteria or whatever, and there's food and stuff like that. And I just sat at a table and I just kind of put my head down and I'm just like, right, trying to take deep breaths, trying to gain control of myself. And of all people who walks in, this guy who's been like an idol of mine since I was a little kid, when he starred on Mr. Belvedere, you remember that? And then, of course, Major League, the movie, and then, of course, his famous legendary broadcasting career, Bob Uecker. And he takes a look at me, and I try and avoid. I'm like, "Oh my God, Bob Uecker's looking at me. I don't look at me." He's like, "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" The first thing he asked was out of concern because he saw that I was like, this madman trying to control myself. And he's like, are you doing okay? Is there anything I could do for you? And I'm just like taking these deep breaths. I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. And here I am. I'm like mortified. I'm embarrassed that I can't complete a coherent sentence to this broadcasting legend. And I'm in broadcasting, right? This is what I do for a living. And I can't even talk to a guy who's like on the Mount Rushmore of broadcasters, right? Sportscasters. And so I'm just embarrassed. And I'm just praying for him to just frankly go away. Go away, Bob Uecker. I'm high on meth. You do not want to have this conversation with me because we ain't having a conversation. Instead of going away, the guy grabs like a little cup, pours some water in it, brings it over to me, stands across from me, puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, "Are you okay? Is there anything I could do for you?" And he's just asking me all these questions like, "How are you? Where are you from? Right? Is there anything I can do for you? Is there someone we can call?" He clearly saw someone who was struggling. I doubt he knew that I had been up for days on crystal, but he knew that I was struggling. He did at that time. He didn't see someone who was to be disgusted by, right? Because so many times when we see drug addicts and we're in the throes of it, oh, that person's disgusting. Let's walk across the other side of the street. No, Bob Uecker did not walk across the other side of the street, so to speak. He walked directly to me. He did a beeline and brought me water and asked me, "Are you okay?" Now, at the time when you're a drug user, when you're high on meth, the last thing you want are more people around, right? The last thing I wanted was more attention. So I drummed up the words, "Thank you, no." And he's like, "Well, you take care. I'll come check in on you after the next inning." Bob Uecker is going to check in on me, right? And he left. And as soon as he walked out, I got the hell out of there. I hauled my ass out of Wrigley as fast as I could. And I felt shame. And what do you do when you feel shame and you're a drug addict? You self medicate, you get high. So I smoked more meth. It was a really rough trip to Chicago. And that was a rough time in my life. But when I got clean years later, I thought back on all those little moments of kindness. There's just those little moments of kindness that people did for me over the years. And Bob Uecker was one of them. He just asked me if I was okay and if I needed help. And he was willing to stick around until I got that help. So we can talk about him as a broadcaster. He was a legend. We could talk about his warmth behind the mic, his funny sayings. Those are all very true, and he should be remembered for those things. But I'm going to remember Bob Uecker as a man who looked at me with compassion and kindness. We're going to miss you, Mr. Baseball. Thank you for what you did for me that day.